betrayal and revenge, broken vows. It was 5:35 in the morning, and I was sitting in a booth at the village inn. I was sipping my coffee and waiting for Rachel to bring me my bacon pancakes. As I refilled my cup from the coffee pot on the table, I thought about what brought me here at this early hour. I was usually there 3 or 4 times a week, but never this early. In fact, this was the first time I'd ever been there when the doors opened at 5:30. I probably should have just gone home and gone to bed, but I didn't because I knew I wouldn't have gotten a good night's sleep, and even if I had, God only knows what my dreams might have been like. It was a story that happened 100 times a day somewhere on the third planet from the sun. A guy goes out of town for 4 days, comes home 2 days early, and finds that his girlfriend is not alone. I wondered how many times in these hundreds of stories the other man was a family member. I called Audrey to let her know I'd be home that night instead of Saturday, but she didn't answer the phone. My flight arrived at 7, and by 8 I was pulling into the parking lot outside our apartment. As I pulled out from around the corner, I saw Audrey come down the steps and get into a car I recognized. I hit the brakes and stopped before I got close enough for her to spot me, and watched as she slid across the seat and kissed the driver. To say I was surprised would be an understatement. Audrey had always insinuated to me that she couldn't stand my brother. According to her, he was an arrogant asshole. So why was she getting in his car and kissing him? Sam pulled in, and I let him get a little ahead of me and then followed him far enough behind that he couldn't see me in the rearview mirror. They pulled into the parking lot at Duke's Steakhouse, parked, kissed, and then got out of the car and walked into the restaurant. I was familiar with the Duke's location and knew there was no way I could follow them and go unnoticed, so I found a parking spot from where I could see Sam's car and then settled in to wait. When they came out, they got in the car and hugged for about 5 minutes, and then I followed them to the barn, which was a country western-style restaurant with a live band. As with Duke's, I was familiar with the insides of the barn and knew there was no place I could sit and not be seen, so I parked again where I could keep an eye on Sam's car and settled in to wait. They stayed there for 2.5 hours, and when they got out, I followed them again. This time they headed for the Saddle Tree Motel. Sam checked in at the front desk, and then Sam and Audrey went into room 107. I gave them 15 minutes to figure out what they were no doubt there for. Then I walked over to Sam's car and let the air out of all 4 tires, then went back and got in my car and waited for them to come out. I wanted to see how Sam would handle 4 tires at 1:30 in the morning. While I waited, I wondered why, since they weren't expecting me for another 2 days, they didn't use the bed in the apartment, and then I realized they couldn't because of Eva, Audrey's sister. And Sam sure as hell couldn't take Audrey home with him because Mom and Dad would know since he was still living at home. Anyway, sort of. There was an apartment above the garage, and that's where he lived, and the apartment could be seen from the kitchen window, and Mom or Dad would probably recognize Audrey. I also wondered how it started and how long it lasted. I usually went out of town every 4 or 5 weeks or so, and I wondered if she did the same thing every time I left. After a couple hours, I resigned myself to the fact that they were staying there overnight, stopped my vigil, and headed for the apartment. When I saw the Village Inn sign, I decided to stop for breakfast. I parked and walked up to the door just as Rachel was unlocking the door. I met Audrey my senior year of college. She was a sophomore, and normally we probably never would have met since we didn't have any classes or friends in common. It was a Friday night fraternity sorority event that brought us together. In addition to members of my fraternity, members of other fraternities were there. Halfway through the party, I was on my way to the bathroom and had just gotten to the top of the stairs when I heard, "Let me go!" I rounded the corner at the top of the stairs and saw a guy dragging a girl to one of the bedrooms. He wasn't a member of my fraternity, and I didn't know him, but I knew I had a responsibility to make sure his actions didn't bring our house into disrepute, so I approached him and told him to let the girl go. He turned to me and said, "Back off, asshole. It's none of your business. Where I grew up, nobody took the time to teach you the Marquis of Queensberry rules. Our rules were, Hit first, hit hard, get on the ground, and don't let you get up. The word deed was still hanging in the air when I kicked him in the balls with my knee. And as he bent at the waist, I elbowed him hard in the head. You can hurt your hand if you hit without padded gloves, and he went down. I turned to ask the girl if she was okay, but all I saw was her ass as she hurried down the stairs. I shrugged and went to the bathroom. When I came out, the guy was sitting there shaking his head to try and clear it up. I went downstairs, called a couple brothers, told them what happened, and we went up to get the guy out of the house. Ben recognized him and went to get a couple of his fraternity brothers to take care of him. I looked around for the girl, but didn't find her and forgot about the episode a couple days later. 3 weeks later, I was sitting at a table at Annie's Cafe eating lunch when a girl came up to me and asked if she could join me. She seemed vaguely familiar, so I motioned for her to sit down. She saw me trying to recognize her and said, "You don't remember me, do you? You seem familiar to me, but I can't remember you." "The party at the Kappa house. You saved me from that Neanderthal." "I didn't get a good look at you, and when I looked for you after it was over, you were gone. And then I should have thanked you, but I got scared and ran away." Then I got the story. She didn't really want to come to the party because she had heard scary stories about what went on at frat parties. Things like date-use drugs being used on unsuspecting girls and other dangers. But her sorority girls had convinced her that nothing like that ever happened at Kappa. So she went, and all was well until she needed to go to the bathroom. A guy caught her coming out of the bathroom, called her a tease, and said he was going to teach her a lesson. "Then you showed up and saved me." "So what did you do that made him think you were a tease and tease him?" "I didn't do anything. I was just trying to be friendly with everyone there. Earlier in the evening, a guy was hitting on me, and I let him know I wasn't interested, but I can't think of anything I could do that could be construed as teasing. I should have thanked you for coming to my rescue, but at the time, all I could think about was getting the hell out of there and getting as far away from that place as possible. This is the first time I've seen you since then, so I came over to give you my belated thanks. Oh, and by the way, my name is Audrey." "Well, Ms. Audrey, I accept your belated thanks, but if you're really grateful, I think you should go on a date with me, at least once." "I'd like that. When? Are you free tonight?" Yeah. "Would 6 squall be okay?" "Great." That date led to many others, and by the time I graduated 3 months later, we were a steady couple. We started making love after our 10th date. We seemed to have a lot of fun together. I learned that Audrey had a strange side to her character. She liked to make love in places where there was some risk of being seen. It excited her, and her excitement excited me. We never got caught, but it was close to that a couple times. She first met my family at a graduation party my parents threw for me. My mom and dad immediately bonded with her, and my brother Sam couldn't seem to take his eyes off of her. I didn't think much of it at the time. Audrey was a beautiful girl, and I was used to men following her around and wishing they owned her. Before I wanted to take Audrey home, my sister took me aside and said, "You're in great luck, bro. Don't let her get away." That night when I took Audrey back to the dorm, I proposed to her, and she said, "Yes, but not until I graduate. As soon as I get my degree, I'll walk down the aisle to you." I thought that was reasonable, even if I didn't want to wait that long. I hadn't found a job yet, so I went with Audrey when she went home for the summer and spent a week with her family. I liked her parents and her younger sister Ava, and they seemed to like me. At the end of the visit, I went home to start my job search. Audrey stayed with her parents for the rest of the summer vacation, so I was pretty much able to focus entirely on my job search. Luck was on my side, and I found a good job within a week of starting my search. Along with the new job, I changed my lifestyle. It was time for me to cut the apron ties, so to speak. I was living at home, and now that I had a job, it was time for me to find my own place. My graduation present from my parents was a check for $10,000, and I used part of it to pay my first and last month's rent and security deposit. I used some of the rest to furnish the apartment. I talked to Audrey almost every night, And while I told her about the new job, I kept quiet about the apartment, intending to surprise her with it when she went back to school. Audrey returned to school 3 days before school started. I picked her up at the airport and headed to the apartment. When I parked in the parking lot, she asked, "Why are you stopping here?" "I thought that since we hadn't made love in over a month, you might want to try my new bed." "Your new bed?" "Uh-huh. I live here now." Once inside, I led her through the rooms, leaving the bedroom for last. Once in the bedroom, I carelessly mentioned that there was plenty of room in the closet for her things and that there were still 3 empty drawers in the dresser. "Of course. If you'd rather live in a dorm than here with me, I'm sure I can fill them with something." "When can I move in?" "Well, I guess we could go get your stuff now instead of making love now and then, going to get your stuff later." Decisions, decisions, decisions. I think since we're already here, we might as well make love first. After a few times, we pressed against each other and fell asleep. The next day, Audrey drove me to work and left my car to move her stuff from the sorority house to her apartment. We stopped and had dinner after she picked me up from work, and then we went back to the apartment, and she did her best to drive me to the point of helplessness. The next year passed while we adjusted to each other's almost constant presence. As with all new full-time partnerships, there were glitches along the way. Audrey was still a full-time student, with class schedules, projects, and study groups to work with, and she still belonged to her sorority and had to attend their events. For my part, I had to work late sometimes, work on Saturdays, and occasionally travel out of town on business. But we managed, and it gave us a very good idea of what life would be like when we were married. Audrey still insisted that the marriage wouldn't take place until she was out of high school. I didn't care because, as far as I could tell, we were already married and just hadn't gotten around to getting the paperwork done. I had some earned vacation time, so when summer vacation came around, I was able to go to her house with Audrey for a week, and then I had to get back to work. I spent a pretty miserable 5 weeks alone. We did talk on the phone 2 or 3 times a week, and we exchanged a hell of a lot of "I love yous" and "I miss yous." When Audrey came back 2 weeks before school started, we spent most of our time in the bedroom trying to catch up. One of those nights, as I lay next to her, tired as hell from what she'd just put me through, and as her hand worked trying to lift me up again, she said, "I need a favor. I need a really big favor. After what you just did to me, I don't think I can refuse you anything." "What is it?" "My sister Eva's flying in on Saturday. She's starting her first school year. Would you mind if she stayed here with us until she gets back on her feet?" I liked Ava, and since the spare bedroom wasn't being used, I had no reason not to let Ava use it. "No problem, sweetheart, but you may have to put a rag in your mouth when we make love. You can be a little noisy, you know, and I wouldn't want to disturb Ava's sleep." "I'm not that noisy." "Oh, yes, you are, and I'm about to prove it." And I did. We picked Ava up at the airport and set her up at our place. Some adjustments were made to the way Audrey and I lived. Adjustments necessary to have Ava with us, but we soon had things working out. Ava was a very pretty young lady, and it wasn't long before she started dating, and the fact that she went on dates gave Audrey and I plenty of alone time, enough to make sure our love life didn't suffer. And then came the trip that allowed me to come home 2 days early. I froze over my breakfast. I needed to go home, shower, and get ready for work, but I wanted to give Eve enough time to leave for class. If she was still there when I got there, my natural question for her, of course, would be, "Where's Audrey?" which would draw her into the whole thing. But then she was probably already in the middle of it. She knows I'm supposed to be away, and she knows Audrey didn't come home last night, and I'm sure she's smart enough to put 2 and 2 together and come up with the right answer. But then again, maybe Audrey gave Eve a perfectly good excuse. But it didn't matter what story Audrey told Eve because I knew the true story. Among the thoughts I had during breakfast was what I was going to do now. That Audrey was the story was self-evident, but what were the mechanics of the breakup supposed to be? A confrontation? Or just pack up her stuff, put it outside, and not bother talking to her? Then, of course, there was my brother. What was I supposed to do with him? That was a much harder question to answer, because whatever I did with him would inevitably involve my parents. They would almost certainly want to know why my relationship with Sam had changed. They'd want to know why I wouldn't attend family functions if Sam was there, and I'd have to tell them. I wouldn't lie to them to let them know the cold, hard truth. I didn't stay long enough, and Eve was still there when I got home. I saw the look on her face. It had gone pale, but I always thought it was a figure of speech until I walked in, and Ava saw me. Her face did turn pale, and that told me that she knew what Audrey was doing. What she didn't know was that I already knew what was going on, so my question, "How long has she been doing this?" took her completely by surprise. She was expecting the question, "Where is Audrey?" and was probably already trying to think of a good answer to that question. My question told her that no lie would work, and I could see in her face that she realized that, but I wasn't prepared for her answer. As far as I knew, she never stopped. She never stopped? What does that mean? She had steady boyfriends throughout high school, and she cheated on every one of them. When you came home with her for the summer, she was on her best behavior, but as soon as you left, she started dating guys she'd known since middle school. I don't know that much about it. I do know that every time you go on a trip, she dates someone. Sometimes she comes home at night, but usually she's not home by the time I leave for school. I was about to say something like, "I thought you liked me enough to let me know what was going on," but I quickly realized how stupid that question would be. He and Audrey were family, and the old saying that blood is thicker than water would be true in this case. "I guess now that you know you're going to kick her out?" You're thinking right. "What's my time frame?" Your timeline? How much time do I have to find a place to sleep? Take as much time as you want. I'm kicking your sister out, not you. I know it might make your relationship with her a little awkward due to you being here after she's gone, but I see no reason to punish you for what she did. How you resolve this with Audrey is up to you, but she won't be here when you get home from class. I'm going to pack up all her things and put them outside for her to see when she finally gets home. I went to the kitchen to get some trash bags, and when I came out, Eva had already left for class. It only took me an hour to remove all of Audrey's presents from the apartment. Knowing that Audrey's first class today wouldn't start until 10:15, and assuming she would get home before going to class, I settled in to wait for her to show up. She arrived at 9:40 and was surprised to see me. She walked over to me and leaned over to kiss me, and then asked, "When did you get home?" "Last night." "Why didn't you call me?" "I called, but you never answered." "I turned off the phone so we wouldn't be disturbed while we were studying." "While we were studying? Who's we?" "Some girls from my management and economics class. It was kind of like a sleepover." The lie rolled off her tongue easily, and if I hadn't seen what she did with my own eyes, I probably would have believed her. Then she asked, "What are those garbage bags by the door?" "That's all your stuff." "My stuff?" "Yes, Audrey, your stuff. I'm kicking you out of my apartment and out of my life." "You're not serious, are you? I mean, we love each other." "I can't speak for your lying ass, but my love for you died last night when I watched you and my asshole brother walk into room 107 at Saddletree. I got home just in time to see you get into Sam's car and then make out with the guy you told me you just couldn't stand because he was an arrogant asshole. After seeing that, I just had to follow you to see what was going on." She stopped talking and regarded me for a few seconds, then said, "Flat tires. Was that you?" I just nodded my head in the affirmative. "I guess I'd be wasting my time if I told you that you were the only one I loved and that Sam was just sex." "You'd be right about that. I don't care why it happened. The only thing that matters is that you did it. I'm just glad I found out about you before I married you." When I said that, her whole demeanor changed. She grinned at me and said, "I never intended to marry you. You were just something that got me through school. A constant and reliable source of sex and food to get me through. You don't make enough money for me to tie myself to you forever." And with those words, she turned and headed for the door. When she got to the door, she turned to me, pointed a finger at me, said, "I hate you," and then walked away. As the door closed behind her, I muttered, "Cheater." I showered and then slept for a couple hours before getting up and going to work to turn in my trip paperwork. Then I went home, and when I got there, I saw that all of Audrey's stuff was gone. I made a meal from the leftovers in the fridge and then decided to get the next unpleasant chore on my list over with. I headed over to my parents' house, planning to visit my brother's apartment above the garage and let him know how unhappy I was with him. I walked up to the door and knocked. After about a minute, Sam opened the door, and when he saw it was me, he smiled and invited me in. The smile told me that Audrey hadn't called him to let him know they had been caught. As a result, the smile was still on Sam's face when my right hand hit him in the jaw. He recoiled, and I followed it up by kicking him in the balls. He fell to the floor, and I kicked him a couple more times and then looked down at him and said, "In case you haven't figured it out yet, I know about you and Audrey. This is just an example of what I will do to you whenever you come near me from now on. I leave it up to you to explain to Mom and Dad why I never come to family functions when you're there." I turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving Sam lying on the floor, gulping for air with his mouth. When I got home, Eve was sitting at the kitchen table doing her homework. She looked up when I walked in and said, "You did it, you really did it. You threw her out of here." "Didn't I mean it when I told you I was going to do it? I knew you were upset, but I figured since you love each other, you'd work it out somehow." "Not in this lifetime, honey." "She called me. She wanted to know where I was going to live when you kicked me out. She couldn't believe you'd let me stay." I shrugged and said, "It's been a long, hard day and I'm going to take a shower and go to bed." So I left her with her homework. And it's been a long, hard day. From the time I found out what was going on to the time I got in the shower, it was only a little over 24 hours. You'd think I'd have trouble sleeping after the day I'd had, but I slept like a dead man. In the morning, I woke up to a conversation. I walked into the kitchen and found Sam drinking coffee with Eva. "What are you doing here?" I growled at him. "We need to talk, bro." "Why would I want to talk to an asshole like you?" "I need to tell you what's been going on." "And you think that's gonna matter? You stabbed me in the back." "You don't understand. I had to do it." "You had to do it. That's what I have to hear." Eva stood up and said, "I'll leave you two to get on with it. I have to go to class," and she left. As soon as she was out the door, Sam said, "Audrey made me do it." "Oh, for Christ's sake, Sam, do you expect me to believe that kind of nonsense?" "It's true. She caught me doing something I needed to hide and threatened to expose me to Mom and Dad if I didn't do what she wanted me to do." "What could it have been?" "She caught me making out with a guy. I'm bi, bro. I go both ways. I'm not the only one she cheated on you with. It happened on your trip to Baltimore. I was at a party thrown by a couple I knew who were bi and who were swinging. It was a party for like-minded people, and I was there with a guy I know when she walked in with another guy I know who goes both ways. She pretended not to know me, and we avoided each other all night, but it was impossible to ignore what she was doing. Half an hour after the party started, she was already pulling the train. Every guy there except me made love to her at least twice and some 3 times. The next day, she called me and said we needed to talk. We met at Bud's bar, and she laid it all out for me. I do what she wanted, and when she wanted, or she would turn me in to Mom and Dad. I couldn't let that happen. Mom probably would have accepted it even if she didn't like it, but you know Dad and what he thinks of anyone. There was no way in hell I was going to let him find out. That woman was one sick fool, bro. She took pleasure in being able to control me. She didn't like me, but she enjoyed being able to make me do whatever she wanted. You have no idea how many hours I spent trying to figure out a way to let you know what a fool she was without exposing myself. And now I expect her to tell Mom and Dad just out of pure vindictiveness. At least you got rid of her. Audrey never called my parents, and Sam and I managed to patch things up. Ava lived with me for another 7 months, and no, I never touched her. Although Audrey kept trying to get her to join a sorority and live in a dorm, but Ava wanted no part of that kind of life. She eventually found a nice guy and moved in with him, but we remained good friends. I lost track of Audrey after I kicked her out, and a couple times Ava tried to tell me about Audrey, but I refused to talk about it, and soon she got the message that I didn't want to hear a single word about anything to do with her sister. Well, that wasn't exactly true. She told me about one thing Audrey was going to do, and I'm glad she did. I managed to sneak in so that no one there recognized me, and I sat in the back. This was my big chance to get back at Audrey, and I was almost wetting my pants waiting to do it. I looked at the guy standing there and guessed he must have money. I was really shaking in anticipation when that moment came, and I heard it. If there is anyone here who knows why these two people should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever be silent. I stood up and said, "Yes, there is." That cheating fool. While she was engaged to me, she cheated on me with my own brother. And when I was out of town on business, she was pulling trains with a bunch of guys. I turned to face the groom-to-be and addressed him personally. If you want to marry this cheater, that's your business. Just remember the axiom that once a cheater always stays a cheater. And then, taking advantage of the stunned silence, I walked out of the church with my head held high and a broad smile on my face, past Audrey prostrate on the floor, sobbing in pain and humiliation. Life is beautiful and goes on. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.